Hello, and welcome to Straight No Chaser with Dr. Julius Bailey. And the show is live from the wonderful campus of Wittenberg University here in Springfield, Ohio. If this is your first time here, then thank you for coming. I really do appreciate you. I don't take you for granted. And you are in for a treat today. I am a professor of philosophy and African American studies here at Wittenberg University. I direct our Justice, Law, and Public Policy program, as well as our pre-law program. I am the author of 5 academic books and 1 memoir. You can find my work on my website. Please stop by my website, check me out, grab something, www.juliusbailey.com. That's www.juliusbailey.com. Just stop by. I want to go to the post office today and send some books out today, so I need y'all to come through. Today's show is special for me. One, before I get there though, we do have a sponsor for today's show. You all haven't seen a sponsor for last a few shows. We do have a sponsor for this week, so I'm excited to say this young man, well, he's not young no more, but this brother is out of Cleveland, Ohio. He wanted to remain anonymous. I don't know if he's embarrassed by me or not, but he did pay for this week's show. And so I want to thank that brother, an anonymous gift from Cleveland, Ohio. He works in the medical field. And so thank you, sir, for your gift. And we'll be giving you a shout out later on. So again, like I said, today is exciting for me. I get to brag on my academic family, my sort of intellectual tree, if you will. And this show, you'll hear about, or you'll know about our little moniker, Degreed Money. And you'll find out that Degreed Money is certainly alive and well in these academic streets. So let's jump right into it. We got a phenomenal long show. Our first guest is Dr. A.D. Carson. He is the assistant professor of hip hop in the Global South at the University of Virginia. He is a performance artist, an educator. His work deals with race, literature, history, performance, and rhetoric. He has been part of my professional life, quite frankly, since 1999, I believe, when he was a young rapper just on the streets of Decatur, Illinois. Stopped by my office one day at Millikan University when I was just a young 26, 27-year-old professor, asking to be a part of a show that I was producing in the city. He left me his mixtape. I listened, and no question, he rapped for the show. And 20 years later, right, we are still brothers. And I'm proud to be on his branch in his mentorship tree. Ladies and gentlemen, after this short little video I want to show you, I want to welcome our first guest, Dr. A.D. Carson. But just watch this video.
I think of your classes as a mix of so many other classes as well. I mean, I think of philosophy, you're covering history, you're covering sociology, culture, you're covering music theory, and language. Language and how your students interpret language for themselves. That's a big part of what you want them to discover too, sort of who they are in the world and how they want to use language.
Well, I think that it's extremely important that we all really think about our relationship to language in the way that has an effect on the world that we live in. The worlds that we create are structured by the language that we engage in or how we engage in language. So it's much more present in this class because I'm asking them to write raps and because there are constraints to each of the projects that I'm giving them that make them have to think. I have 16 bars to get across a point that is predetermined, which means that I only have a certain number of words that I can say.
Right.
So I have to evaluate my relationship to language to be able to navigate that in such a way that it's going to create something that I am proud of.
Gratitude is my attitude. I don't always say a lot, but I ain't mad at you. I not only want to say it, I wanted you to have it and to play it.
Like, people have very different experiences, and this is kind of the time where I've realized that my experience is just one experience. This class has definitely made me aware a lot more about what hip hop means and why it's important that we recognize the work that has already been done.
It really isn't just a music form, it's an entire culture, and I really like that we are not restrained in what we can say. Like, we know that even if we have a controversial opinion or interpreted something differently than others, that it's a place where we can talk about that, and we're not gonna get criticism from him or get told that we shouldn't go in that direction with our discussion.
If you look back on the lyrics that they used to say in the 90s or 80s, you'd be like, whoa, like this is really violent. I feel like some of the lyrics that they used back then would not be acceptable today because people would be more outraged and say this is wrong.
I think about Joyner Lucas's I'm Not a Racist, the song, where I think lots of folks felt that that was like this binary that we're always trying to create, like both sides of the argument. And if it's a song like that that's really, really popular and is striking a chord with so many people, it's really important if we're in a class about writing raps to have the conversations that we are having amongst people who are from so many different areas of the university and from so many different walks of life.
And what did they think of the class? So tell me about your students.
Lots of them are really big fans of the music, and they bring a lot of that to the conversation. And then there are others who don't know very much and want to learn. And I think that that's kind of a dope thing. I mean, it's the way that like hip hop influences the world or rap music influences the world. It's not just looking at people who are into music, or it's not just looking at people who are into hip hop culture. It's really popular music.
Isn't it the #1 music form?
Yeah, it's most consumed, and that makes it easier for me to make an assertion that like most of the students likely have had some experience with rap music.
I'm really curious too now if like Chance lifted that.
That's a good question, right?
Yeah. Huh.
So give me some examples of what else you'll be doing throughout the year.
We start off, as I said, we talk about like our relationship to language, and we have to have the conversation about the so-called N-word. The question is always asked, who has the right to say it and who doesn't. And I think it's important that we have.
My brother, Dr. A.D. Carson, how you doing, man?
Peace. I'm good. How are you?
Oh, man, it's always a blessing and pleasure to be around you, man, and to be in your company, and even on this virtual sense to see you. I see that beard is growing.
Well,
I see.
Yeah. Juices and berries, It's really,
man, so look, man, it's thank you. Just thank you for all that you do. Thank you for all that you do for the culture. Thank you for all that you do for academia. And so I think that we should probably start for those who may not know much about you. Obviously, there'll be a lot who do, but for those who don't, let's just start with really what kind of catapulted you into sort of hip hop culture, into academia culture, when in 2017 you completed your PhD from Clemson University, and many in the hip hop community know your dissertation. The title was "Owning My Masters: The Rhymes and Rhetoric, or the Rhetorics and Rhymes, right, of revolutions." That obviously was a bit unconventional, right? And unless I'm wrong, it may have been a precursor to your current digital album, which we'll talk about later. But can you briefly tell the audience, like, what prompted you to do a mixtape as your dissertation?
yeah. So I think that when I started down at Clemson, and I think that even part of what took me down to Clemson was that I was working in Illinois, and I think that we have this really weird kind of public fascination with hip hop, where folks will love to consume the music while at the same time pathologizing the music and the people who make it. And so folks love to talk about it. And in my case, like working in a school district where it's heralded when folks talk about how you might be able to connect with students, but then turn around and once there's a complaint, about folks not being able to understand what's going on, then, like there's an official board, in this case, school board is sitting here thinking that they will be able to determine whether, like my engagements in language are appropriate or not. And then me saying, well, I can talk to your school board the same way that I talk to students, the way that I talk to people all over the country. And they're like, no, well, we're going to determine this, just, cool out. And then what I thought at that moment is like, well, like this has to do with how people perceive folks to be experts and how experts get made. And so when I went down to Clemson, I was thinking very particularly about how I might be able to talk about what rap music does other than entertain us. And I had some particular ideas about the way that I would do that, like maybe, kind of in a definitional sense, or to try to like help people understand what rappers might mean when they do certain things. And then what I realized is that my thinking was, I think, overpowered by that same tendency that I was critiquing. Like I was just trying to do sort of a larger scale version of that. And at some point during the graduate studies, and that was like the challenge of great teachers and good mentorship, saying that, well, if that's your critique, if your analysis is that it's wrong when people do this particular thing, what makes you think that you doing it somehow is going to be something other than wrong? So I'm like, yeah, so this maybe means that rather than writing the thing about the music, I write the music, like that analyzes, like it's like from the music going outward rather than being on the outside, sort of like trying to examine and then, like create like these categories for the music to go into, like these proper, literary or rhetorical categories. And so then, like I put together a set of questions that I was thinking about that would be answered by this album, but that also would not, like the album isn't the only response to the questions, or it's not the only possible response. It's just one of many possible responses. And so I've attempted to answer those questions several times since I did Owning My Masters.
Right.
I went back and I did Sleepwalking Volume 1, Sleepwalking 2, and then I Used to Love to Dream. But and it's because, like initially, I also thought like, yeah, they probably won't take it. Like, we have a lot of resistance to this kind of thing. It's like more generally, like, in this public resistance to, like we try to, there are moments where folks will have an intellectual, conversation, like they'll try to engage in, like these so-called academic ways with rap music. But it's so rare that folks take the conversation seriously. I didn't expect that the folks at Clemson would take it seriously enough to, like even bring it to the, through the process of the prospectus, and through the defense.
Right.
I guess I had a plan for it, but, like I didn't, there was no guarantee in my mind that was going to happen.
Sure. Yeah. We will talk a little bit about that process a little bit later. But I do want to again applaud you for your persistence. And so as a follow-up to that, though, were you surprised with the accolades and the interest across the hip-hop communities, both here and abroad?
I wasn't surprised. I was humbled by it. I think there were a lot of great conversations that came out of it, a lot of really earnest engagement, and lots of opportunities to be able to have conversations like this. And then, like I said, I learned a lot of lessons from it. I learned, number one, that ain't nobody listening to a 34-track album, not all the way through, and so, and that also, that has to do with the fact that, there are certain folks who were never going to be convinced that the contribution that I was offering would be, like something that they should take up. So you try to give them more material, you try to like overachieve, and then they just find other ways to shit on it. So, so that's one of the things that I learned. But the interest that people that held people and like folks like opening up conversations to really like think and talk about this, to be able to talk to graduate students and like even programs about how they might open up their conception of what a dissertation project might look like. That to me, that was really humbling. That was a really like, and I feel really productive. There are lots of people who are still asking these questions today. And so every time I'm asked about those kinds of things, I take it really seriously. And I don't feel like the challenging questions that people ask in those ways are dismissals of rap music or of hip hop culture. I really do believe that these are ways that, these are some of the conversations that we can be having, even the conversations around peer review, where they are earnest about what, like who are peers and what that looks like, or like to take into consideration the peer review processes that already exist within hip hop culture that folks are going through all the time. Right, and, so like, because at that point, like it ain't it ain't reviewer 1 and 2 who you got to worry about. It's your homeboy who, like who's got the stone face all the time. And you're hoping that this song is going to, like impress that person. Or, like for me, like maybe it's my grandma, who is like, well, you could say that, but do you have to say that stuff to get your point across? Like that kind of thing. And so there's always been that. But what does it mean in this context to have peer review? Yeah.
So no, that's an important transition. So as the promotion of the show highlights, your new project, I Used to Love to Dream, is by the University of Michigan Press. It is the first of its kind, right? And congratulations, first of all, obviously on this trailblazing work. But your album / ebook / sort of is offered right on the open source platform by the University of Michigan called the Fulcrum, right? And Fulcrum is sort of a new media kind of form of scholarship that I actually was perfect for this type of academic project. So let's put this out there, right? Because you mentioned it. I Used to Love to Dream was a peer-reviewed project, right? Mm-hmm. As all academic books and academic essays are, and reviewed by academics, right? Mm-hmm. And so I guess I want to ask you sort of, yes, there is a sense that the performer in you, right, is listening to, as you say, the homie in the hood, your friends on, all across the nation. But the academic in you also has to put together something, both, audible as well as, bibliography that makes sense to us academics. Obviously, you've been doing this, but if somebody out there is thinking, oh, I want to do that, kind of give us a brief understanding that this isn't as easy as it might have sounds.
Yeah, I think that, number one, it takes patience because, it's just an extra step. Making an album takes patience. I think that it's, I would never tell my students this particularly, but when we start our composing mixtapes class, I think I normally, tell them that we should probably set the bar kind of low, and that, given the constraints of what we're doing, I don't know how good the project is going to be, but we're going to learn through the process of making it. And that's partially because they have 16 weeks to do it, but to take off the 16-week constraints. And, I've got an album, then I've got to convince somebody, or I'm already in conversation with people about this album that's unwritten or that's in the process of being written, and having to articulate what kind of contribution it's going to offer. And then thinking with them about the kinds of people who we won't have to explain why we're doing this album to. They'll actually engage with the album and the content of the album. And I think that should also never be slept on, the fact that, some really dope ass academics out here. And our understanding of who a professor is and the reality of who professors are kind of different, because there are lots of, I think, really, there are a substantial amount of people who are qualified to engage in this kind of process. And my hope is that the folks who are reviewing the album fall into that category and not, the category of person who's like, well, why are we even doing this? So there's that. And for me, there's the practical, the why, the practical in the practical sense is that I have to, I'm in a tenure track job and I want to be able to stay in the job. And the way that I got here wasn't doing the thing that people traditionally do in order to, to achieve that, which means that I have to try to make sure that there's a lane to continue to do the kind of thing that I do. But you and I both know that it's not like I haven't done the other things.
Right.
It's not like, I'm incapable of writing, but I very rarely want to engage that question because again, we're going back into that, that weird, starting at a deficit kind of conversation where it's well, can he not write? And that it's really weird to me that we're at this position where some, I'm a doctoral candidate and then somebody's but can he not write an essay? Because if the degrees that brought me to this were in English and literature and education, well, I didn't rap those.
Rap through that, right? You didn't rap through that, right?
Yeah, and now I was a rapper while I did it,
right?
And so I don't want to deny aspects of my personality or who I am in order to appease these people who are asking these questions. And again, I don't think that a lot of times they're earnest questions.
Right.
I think that those are questions that people they're these knee-jerk questions that people have about hip hop and what they assume hip hop artists don't bring to their compositional process.
Right.
And again, those questions, I don't want to entertain them as legitimate because it's whack. That's we got better conversations that we could be having.
No, that's real, man. And I appreciate you identifying that. We'll probably flesh a little bit out when we bring in our guests who are ready to come in. But we're going to ask you one more kind of not personal question, but question for us. And then we'll bring our guest in. So hip hop, right, is often about location and place, right? Yep. Where's Brooklyn at? Where's Brooklyn at? You know what I'm saying? And welcome to Atlanta, just all this kind of stuff, right? And so this project, I used to love to dream. This project is also about context, right? Decatur, Illinois. Tell us about your home, our home, right? As its impact to this project.
Yeah. So, when I was growing up, we moved around a lot. And it was all over Illinois, but I was born in Decatur, and we would move down south to where my grandparents lived in Sandusky, Illinois, and then up to Joliet, and then back to Decatur, and went to just about all of the schools there, and I think that every time we left, we had this joy in being able to go back to Decatur where our family was, where my grandma's porch was it was just home base for not just us, but for everybody. Her backyard where the basketball hoop was where everybody was at on the weekends. She so I guess it was this great place to grow up. But then there's all of this other stuff that you'll see in the album or that you're here in the album that kind of makes sense when you hear that, in 2018 that the USA Today released this list of the 15 worst cities for Black Americans, and it's ranked number 7. And this survey is thinking particularly about income and poverty, education, home ownership, unemployment, and mortality rates. Mm-hmm. And then earlier this year, it ranked number 3, Decatur, on the 15 fastest declining cities with populations of 50,000 people or more.
Right.
And so then to try to square that with those memories, those wins and those losses, and then the wondering about where you are now and your sort of critical outlook on where you are, like me here in Charlottesville, or being there in Clemson, South Carolina, and having all of this energy that I'm giving to those particular places because that's where I'm living and that's where I'm writing. And then thinking, well, how can I offer something to Decatur in that way, especially when I don't live there anymore, but, my family is still there.
No question.
And so the album, I think, tries to connect the, like the here and the there, both in the, like, sort of like how, like here and there as in like right now and, however many years ago,
right.
Here as in like Charlottesville and Decatur, here as in assistant professor of hip hop and, like dude who was just trying to like, do shows and put an album out, like, cause in high school, like, while, I certainly wanted to go to college, even if I didn't have a plan, like I thought I'm gonna go to college and I'm gonna get a degree and I'm gonna do something. And if not, then I can come back and work at the factory that my pops works at.
Right.
But more than anything, I wanted to release an album. Like I said, I want to release a rap album and I want to write a book. Those are the two things in my life that I want to do as a high school student. So like, it's really interesting to look back from here, having done those things and say, well, now what does it mean? Like, what do you do with it? Like, how do you account for, those dreams?
Right. And that's why, obviously, Decatur is my second home, and I love its people, and obviously I love your family. And you talk about your grandma, and that matriarch. I mean, you got a lot of uncles and cousins, and everybody in Decatur have been influenced by your family, and so I'm sure everybody is proud of you as their native son. And every now and then I get people to say they're proud of me too, but they definitely love you, brother. So look, we're just gonna add to this conversation a little flavor, a little Cajun salt, a little African salt. We're just gonna put it all up in the mix and see what happens. First, we have been on with Dr. A.D. Carson, who is assistant professor of hip hop in the Global South at University of Virginia. And we are about to be joined by two other academics who are part of our intellectual family here. We have our newest PhD to the crew in Dr. Dalitso Ruwe, but his friends call him D. And on Facebook, y'all know him as Alfresco. And Dr. Ruwe graduated in philosophy from Texas A&M University. He came to work here at Wittenberg for a year, and now he is the postdoctoral fellow for new narratives in philosophy. I welcome you, brother. How you doing?
Man, I am good. Shout out to finally get a chance to be on a show with AD. So I'm excited for this, man. Doc, it's a long time coming, the energy we bring in, but I'm excited to be part of the show with AD and just talk a little bit about the work and, gang, we here.
Gang, we in this place, man. We're gonna go ahead and bring our sister in because we don't want her noise. When she start getting mad, everybody gonna hear it. So one of the finest teachers in America right now happens to be our dear sister, Dr. Shadawn Dattle, who, after hanging out with me here at WIT for about 4 years, I get the years kind of confused now, but she is now the assistant professor of Gender and Diversity Studies at Xavier University in Cincinnati. Welcome to the show, Dr. Battle, but I know your friends call you Dr. Booby. How you doing?
Thank you, man. I'm blessed to be amongst my family. My students, I want y'all to know my students think we lame for having this academic clique. Degree, money, entertainment.
Right, but ain't nobody effing with our clique though. So you know what I'm saying? If we keep it real about it in these streets. But look, D, let me just start with you. You know me better than probably anyone in the room, although everybody here know me, but you know me probably better. You've heard the album, I Used to Love to Dream by our guy, A.D. Carson. As you heard the album, we'll get to your favorite soon. But I want to test you here. Do you know what my favorite song of this album might be?
I think so. It's Ready. I think Ready is the cut.
Ready is certainly a cut. I do like Ready, and we'll get into that. But Ready ain't quite the most meaningful. Let me just play what to me is the most meaningful song of the track of the album to me. Let's just play it real quick.
Yes, yes. Vintage. Just another day in a pretty boring life. I write, perform like ignoring hype, polite like I was born nice. Soar at heights where I don't need to see. I'm easily the type you peep at night, and you don't need to squint. The heat for me is bright. When I breathe on mics, it's like I'm heathen. I won't ever even odds. I'd rather tweet a blog than be like Stephen Jobs. I'd rather stay and laugh than leave and sob. I'd rather break the whole machine than try to limit me and be a cog. When they ask me what I'm trying to preach, I pause. I tell them, I don't know the difference from a demagogue and demigod. King size but serving mini bars. But I assume if you consume too many, then they'll hit you plenty hard. They'll say my whole demeanor's been a fraud. An intricate facade won't offer no rebuttals. This is part of where my newfound vision starts. A written art comparable to living hard, avoiding prison bars. Collected thoughts is like a mini mart, and don't want any part of trendy artificial little pity party celebrating how I made it out of unimaginable trauma. It's the drama that they want, and so I honor what I've come to do and what I'm coming to and what I want to do. So what I've brung to you has sprung into a kind of comfortable existence I'll call wonderful. If after I wander through this new terrain I found a way to frame the pain as something new.
Here, close to the center of the United States, the sign on the highway reads, Decatur, Illinois, population 59,305. From a distance, it looks like any other town of its size. Its people make their living from factories, stores, offices, railroads, and surrounding farms, just as in many other American communities. When you meet them on Main Street, they look as familiar as anyone's neighbors anywhere in the United States.
But go out with them, and you'll begin to sense a difference.
And the best route to frame pain, to sort of navigate truth within a world of lies, trying to find moments of happiness in a malaise of pain. And so for me, this track, did a lot to me because AD said almost like what James Baldwin says, that I have these scaffolds of lies, and he says that my demeanor is a fraud. And there's a sense to which, especially working at PWIs, right? I find myself smiling when I ain't happy. You know what I'm saying? I find myself writing about stuff that I really don't want to write about, just as AD talked about earlier, just to appease the canon. And so framing pain becomes important. Brother, AD, tell us about this track, man. What brought you to write it? And certainly, am I off in terms of how I interpret it, interpret this piece?
Yeah. So, no, I think it's spot on. Even the song the song itself is an attempt to. I think the song itself is an attempt to do the same kind of thing where it kind of comes across as, kind of like just bragging on the track and really, like doing what an intro song for an album might do. But then like, as we sort of venture into that, to say that, just another day in a pretty boring life. And then like sort of like try to have that fold in on itself to say, well, why might I frame it that way? And then to kind of think about what this album is even engaging in. Like, what am I attempting to give you as an album? So what would I do if I was writing an introduction for a different form of writing? How would I encapsulate everything that goes on in such a way that I don't give you all of it, but I give you a sense of what you're about to get? And then when we read all of the chapters and then we refer back to the introduction, it still all sticks. It's like, this is what was happening here, and this is what was happening here. All of these things sync in the way that. I think that I'm thinking about different forms as I'm performing or writing that piece. But this is like the kind of track that you write after you've written the album to say, here's what you're about to get.
Right. 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 No, I feel that. So, I really want to ask AD and Shadawn to jump on this. So, I mean, you heard how he framed his framing pain. The two of you, teach, literature, you teach Black voice, you teach philosophy, you teach everything that, AD brings into this album. Let's start with you, Shadawn. Sort of, how would you situate AD within the sort of the tradition of Black voice? And then I'm going to ask you the same thing, D.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think 80s like hip hop pedagogy is like synonymous with what one might term epistemic activism, right? So he's like constantly engaging in this like rhetorical sparring match with those in power or with those in history, trying to disrupt these normative ways of knowing the world and Black people in particular. Like, and he does so like in really transgressive ways, because if you think about it, like he's forcing us to or he's actually forcing a reality that is curated from the perspective of Black people. Therefore, he's like sort of repositioning or resituating us as in like Black people as like epistemic agents of our experiences, of our identity, of our culture. And then D and I were talking like, yeah, we were reminded of the fact that he has this literary background, right? And so for me, given that, he's like this narrative combatant, right? Because he often like reverses these narratives that are nothing short of just false constructions of reality, like so that we can begin the process of interrogating. You mentioned the lies, and I know you just had Dr. Glad on a few weeks back, right? So he wants us to interrogate the lies upon which the country has been erected, and he wants us to also interrogate the ways in which, and he even mentioned the pathologizing of Black folks, right? And I think, like, simply put, AD is constantly like Al Goring folks, right? Hitting them with these inconvenient truths. AD, that's a pretty cool eponym, ain't it?
Right. AD is Al Goring folks,
Yes,
right?
He Al Goring folks, and so, but for real, like when I teach him, I situate him within this tradition of Black thinkers who I think are unequivocally forcing America to confront this historical record of violence and the lies that it tells. So that means placing him alongside names like Baldwin or Malcolm X or Frederick Douglass or David Walker. And I think even Ta-Nehisi Coates is engaged in this process of like narrative demystifying. And maybe like the most obvious example is See the Stripes, right? And so he's like, we can't depend on the tour guide to acknowledge our shameful past. It's too uncomfortable for us to talk about the white supremacists and the segregationists. And he's like, well, let me do the honors. Like, let me disclose this bloody unspooling of Clemson. And then Frederick Douglass is doing the same thing.
Douglass.
Right? Yeah, he's like, he literally says like, no, we're going to talk about this day from the point of view of the slave. And I teach grading on a curve, and AD, he's like, yeah, I think it's offensive for people to hear me say I spit for niggas. And I can actually hear Douglass saying, yo, I'm not up here using this platform for the edification of your distorted versions of liberty and national identity. To the contrary, I spit for niggas. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But I also teach the hook of grading on a curve, right? With Baldwin. And you mentioned Baldwin, and I think like Baldwin is key to understanding race relations in this country, like especially in the 20th century. And AD's work fits within that tradition. Like in the hook in that song, he's like, they say it's often the us that'll up and pull it, but us is very different when punctuated with bullets. Us or US, as and they'll probably say, in target practice, using our backs, they get an A. And then they grading on the curve, say it to our face, they say you're grading on their nerves by bringing up the past and saying certain words. And so AD, like Baldwin, is always forcing a conversation, making us realize that like if America was ever great, make America great again, it's only because of the brutalization of Black people, riddling their bodies with bullets, right? And so like, and if you say it to their face, they'll say you're grading on his nerves. Likewise, Baldwin is like, look, forcing America to shatter the lie would occasion its madness, because then it would have to give up too much, right? It would have to sort of give up its privileged position and come to terms with the fiction of its identity and with white supremacy. And I think he's doing the same kind of disinterring of truth on a new album, especially in tracks like Crack USA, where he's reminding us of the true culprit of the drug war. Y'all were the ones pillaging our communities with impunity, and Black folks were the ones targeted by what was marketed and sold to us by us. By us, I mean US. And lest I be unclear, objects in the mirror may be nearer than they appear, right? But notwithstanding the truth of this narrative, I think his point is that Black folks were still positioned as the enemy of the state, right? Which justifies the war that was waged on them, whereas white folks are positioned as the victims of the opioid crisis, deserving of reform and
Healing
deserving
reform, right.
of sympathy, right? And so like what I see AD doing in this song is shifting the narrative again, or inverting this sort of epistemological framework, reminding his listeners that Black folks don't deserve the scars. They didn't deserve to be slaughtered, and that they deserved instead like a poetic libations.
No, I appreciate that. AD, I'm a ask Dalitso to jump in, but AD, I want you to write that down, man. If you didn't get that, you are an epistemic activist, man.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? I know you don't like to be called a social justice activist, but you are an epistemic activist, and we at Straight No Chaser, we gonna drink to that one. You know what I'm saying?
Drink some coffee to that.
Yes, yes.
D, man, how do you situate AD's work within the history of Black letters and Black thought and intellectual inquiry?
Yeah, and man, I mean, Dr. Battle let down the gauntlet there, so I don't know if I can say anything outside of what she laid down, but yeah, I mean, just thinking from the hip hop perspective, when I first heard the album, it reminded me of two albums. I thought about Gil Scott-Heron album, Pieces of a Man, and then I thought about AZ, right? Like, so AZ and Gil Scott-Heron, and I just kept thinking, and Gil Scott-Heron is important for a couple of reasons, right? When he's at Johns Hopkins getting his master's, he's writing short stories, poems, so before we know that Gil Scott-Heron becomes a musician, he's engaged in a similar production like AD, right? Like, how is he transforming stories? And, one of his books he publishes, The Voucher, is an interesting story about, it's like a Richard Wright, his son creates, he does some criminal stuff, but it's this expose about the Black community, right? So I kept thinking about the ways in which AD forces a new conversation. Shout out to Mark Anthony Neal for talking about the new Black man, right? Like what that looks like in that discourse. And so this conversation, like you were talking about, the framing of pain is existential, but it's not such a nihilistic one, right? It's just ways you're overcoming these things, and why I like Ampersand, which is my favorite track. The braggadocio, but it's vulnerable. It opens up a different understanding of the social millennium in which AD's reared in, but also just the world. And so that becomes informative, right? I think my favorite ending is Asterix when he talks. He puts in the segment of Decatur could be your town, like. There's just this ending towards Decatur cannot just be the geography in terms of Illinois and Chicago. It could be any town in the U.S. and broadly construed wherever we find Black folk trying to overcome these issues. And so I think what AD does a lot is also even destabilize what this notion is of a Black academic, right? Like this is very conversation now that we're struggling with now, even to understand when we see Trump coming down and critical race theory, right? Like what does that mean for academics who teach these things about race, class, gender, sexuality and white supremacy, to see the president take a mandate to say, we're going to have to figure out how y'all doing this. And then conversely, to think about what's happening real time on the streets where we're using hashtags to try to amplify voices of Black folk, right? Say their names, right? Like we're in this space in which we're grappling for language that gives existence to Black folk. And it's always been music that's done that, right? Like I was thinking about James Weldon Johnson's, Lift the Negro, or even the idea of the ex-colored man, right? The musician struggling to find his voice in his white world, right? Like, so AD really has this organicness to him. It's a different reality than most of us come in, like you're pointing out. Some of us are forced either a liberal education that prepares us for this sort of pandactic way we engage with the academy. But I think you do a lot to destabilize even how hip hop studies came into the academy, right? When so many people were more theorists than actual practitioners. And so to get an album that really puts the practitioner, the material history, onto sort of the canvas of what hip hop studies is, it's different because the debates that were happening in 1994 in Congress was really about put them labels on these albums, right? Like we don't want these albums in this space. So to have somebody who's a practitioner to really reset the conversation is like, this is what we've been waiting for. So it's and I'll end here just to think about, the larger genius of Black intellectual writing has always been beyond just, academic text, right? So Du Bois is writing short stories, he's writing in newspapers, they're writing letters. And I think AD brings that out again, right? Like so much of what it means to be a Black intellectual is beyond what is accepted in academia. And we get that sense of creativity here, particularly as it interrogates, America as a declining empire. So I'm excited for this project to keep listening to it, but yeah.
No question. And I'm glad you mentioned Gil Scott-Heron, because that's what I was thinking about last night. Like I was thinking AD, Gil Scott-Heron. I was certainly thinking, I'm glad that Dr. Battle, said Douglas, because, AD in a sense, does have that Douglas in him, and then obviously Baldwin. So for me, that's where I fit AD in within sort of Douglas, Gil Scott, a little bit even. I think a little bit of Amiri Baraka, right? But I don't want to get him. I don't want to get him in trouble though, right down there on the East Coast. But there is a little bit of Amiri Baraka in him as well. But you had mentioned performance, D, and one thing we know, and that everybody on this show knows, because obviously that is one thing that I harp on all the time, is that teaching is as much as performance as anything else, right? And so I know, D, you and I had this conversation. Me and Shadawn has had this conversation. AD and I have had this conversation. I mean, teaching is about performance. And so what AD does, right, though, is a little bit different, though, right, than what you and me do, D, or as philosophers, or even as Shadawn does, as a lit crit person. AD actually is a performer. Although you can't tell Professor Battle she ain't got bars, though. You can't tell her that. But she gonna act like she got them. But the point is, though, AD does enter this space as both performer and teacher. And so I want to ask you, AD, what is your thoughts on teaching as performance, and how does rap inform your teaching?
Yeah, well, I appreciate all of the remarks thus far. There's this. I very rarely am rapping in my classes, and very rarely at a rap show am I lecturing from the stage. But I do believe that each of those places benefit from the other, being a part of what I do in other places. So I don't believe that we can get out of performance. I don't believe that there's a way, like that there's any space in our lives where we aren't performing. And that's just something that I keep with me at all times. So I think that I'm thinking about performance in all of these ways. And, just sort of being in the world is always being conscious of the performance that I'm engaged in at a particular moment. And the one that seems most present to most people is when I'm standing behind a microphone, or when you get, an album that has a picture that I obviously took for the purpose of being, like the cover of the album, and there's artwork and all of that, because then there's all of this framing for this particular performance. And you don't necessarily get that before you walk into a classroom.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think that we all, especially anybody who's ever, perform music, or been put on the spot to have to freestyle, when you get in the class and your lecture isn't working, or the engagement that you thought you were going to get from a particular set of questions doesn't really get the class engaged in the way that you want them to be, then you got to think of something else on the spot to engage them, or lose them, or just sit there, in the awkwardness. And I think that all of those things also have their, their use. There are definitely times where I'm like, I know it's going to be awkward, and we're going to sit here and sit in the awkwardness. But most of the time, I want to feel energy from the students. And as a performer in that lecture, there are things that I have to do in order to elicit that energy from them.
Right. And this is where, I know this show is about you, AD, but I do want to give a little shout out to Shadawn, because, if I think of Shadawn, 7, 8 years ago, even 5 years ago, maybe even 4 years ago, I think about, calling Dalitso and saying, D, man, I'm frustrated, man. Shadawn she ain't got enough fluidity in her, man. She's rigid, man. She just want to stay locked in, and I watch her in public, and she's brilliant, but she just want to stay locked in. And then I don't know, and I'm going to ask you, Shadawn, I don't know if something clicked 2 years ago or something like that. But now you have a lot more fluidity. I don't know if you've been listening to a little jazz music. I don't know if you've been watching the BT hip hop ciphers, but your pedagogy is becoming a lot more fluid than I know it took you a while to get to what I literally spent time with Dalitso about it. Our reading had all to do with being able to be fluid enough in any context. So I want to ask you, Shadawn, in what ways have you learned to be a little bit more performative, a little bit more fluid in your teaching pedagogy?
Thanks for that. I guess that was a compliment.
I don't know if it was or not. Come to think about it, it's no diss though. You know that.
No,
it's just
all
growth.
good.
Right?
It's all good, man. We family, so we gotta check each other periodically. But like, I'm always reminded of the conversation that AD has about dope, right? The presence of hip hop in the academy, right? And how like it's, you know what I'm saying, it's like dope. It's like it's too potent for the academic body. So I think you said something, AD, like you gotta cut it all the time. With all these valorized disciplines, right? Everything that's going to make them more receptive, right? Everything that's going to make basically what they're hearing more palatable. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to do that. Like, I want to be like the very thing that's potent. Like, I want like the substance of what I'm teaching to be the like hip hop, like what you're doing with hip hop, like to be like the very substance against which everything else is measured. Right. And so that means that, I think he's doing that with ampersand because he's like collapsing the here and now. Right. So how do I exist within this space? I have to sort of carve out these sort of subterranean spaces of subversion. And AD, we had this conversation about that's what sort of Fred Moten is getting at. Right. And the way that I do that is through this sort of metaphysical travel back home. Right. Where and a more authentic sense of self is. And I have to bring that self into the space in which I exist in this academy that's not really built for me. Gotcha. Right. And if I think about how Mike Brown was dehumanized because he made rap songs, right? So the academy wasn't made for hip hop. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And for the potency of rap music. And so how do I use this space in order to render myself legible? And the only way to do that is to perform authentic versions of myself that exist in home place, right? In the space of home. And so,
and I thank you for that. Obviously, for those who want to do more research on Professor Battle, she is certainly, like I said, an outstanding teacher, but she also has finished up a sort of a documentary on footwork. And so when she talks about bringing home into her current academic space, the same way Professor Carson talked about that, every time he's in Clemson, South Carolina, or he's in Charlottesville, Virginia, he's also bringing a piece of Decatur in with him. Obviously, footwork is a part of Professor Battle's origins, her nascent being. And so we thank you for being improvisational in that sense. AD, we go all the way back, man, to obviously I said to your original background, but in terms of academically, when you did write your novel Cold, right? And I remember I taught Cold, and then Cold was your novel. I think you had Cold and Cold. I don't want to get them messed up. I know you had two versions of it, right?
There were two mixtapes and an album two mixtapes came out before the book, and then the book came out with an album.
Right. And so, and then obviously for those who want to follow AD's sort of career, a lot of things, but I'm making the nexus between this family here, the Degreed Money family. You also wrote a chapter in both the Jay-Z anthology as well as the Kanye anthology. I know a lot of us, including my assistant who's sitting here listening, excited too, because she did some work and she still talks about the work that she did in Professor Battle's class on See the Stripes. Professor Battle, we have Jasmine Evans is here and she wanted to say hello to you. And so, but right now, you are obviously, huh?
Oh, I'm just saying, what's up, Jasmine?
What's up?
What's up?
Yes,
I miss having you on campus. We all do.
I was about to say I miss being here.
All right. So we're moving forward, and so we're gonna drink to that one. We're gonna just drink to that because I want to stay on campus. And so
I'm bringing home a sense of home place, right?
Yeah, I know. Let's just leave it there.
Ethos.
But no, I just want to say, man, thank you again for all you do for hip hop pedagogy. I sometimes think about my life and I think about that first article I wrote on Mystical back in, for Vibe back in 99, 98. And I think of everything that I've done since then has been all about trying to bring hip hop to the classroom and having to navigate all the critics and all the spaces that you talk about. So I just want to say that I'm certainly grateful to UAD for your discipline, for your authenticity, and your voice in the culture. D said this, I want to get into it. I want to play another track from this album, which he's right. This is my party track. I can't lie. Which is Ready. Let's go ahead and play that real quick.
Yeah. Break away the chains, we don't need charms. With our love, with our knowledge, we don't need arms. Welcome brothers home, we don't need lines. Keep the uncles in the house, we don't need times. At the lab in Virginia, all we need drums. Couple basses and a sample, finish it in ample. Heavy on the hearts, make it difficult to handle. Not saying shit, it's the breeze against the candle. So I chopped it up with Dilla, pianos in the sample. Middle of the winter, but the roof is like Orlando in the middle of the summer. The visit was an honor. I met a couple game-changing folks on the come up like well-versed in history and fiction. I'm sitting back thinking like, this what we've been missing. This should be the mission, to cash in on the pain. From laughter and shame, the passion remains, cause we ready. We gon' take it, we gon' make it, cause we ready. We gon' scream it, we gon' play it in our Chevys. Not a building, not a body, or a levee. Joe, we ready.
Yo, we ready. We gon' rip it or we'll tip it if it's steady. We gon' lift it even if the shit is heavy. Keep the mission with the vision on the deadly. Yeah, we ready. Hey yo, they say there's something special about a black love. And if they ain't never had it, then they lack love. It's like them conversations in the back of a mind where it's defined as being backed up. Yo, if the door's open and we all come through, and being here is what it all comes to, it was worth it to share it. I mean, I purposely cherish the very thought of a practice, creating habits to challenge the way to sharpen the steel that'll need itself to be better at doing what it does. It's what it always was, and what it will be will. And if we still be still, then there ain't no way that we'll be killed. So I say let's be, and if I can, let me. There's much more than what the world lets see. So I say let's be, and if I can, let me. There's much more than what the world lets see.
Cause we ready. We gon' take it, we gon' make it, cause we ready. We gon' scream it, we gon' play it from our Chevys. Not a building, not a body, or a levee. Joe, we ready.
Yo, we ready. We gon' rip it or we'll tip it if it's steady. We gon' lift it even if the shit is heavy. Keep the mission with the vision on the deadly. Yeah, we ready. Ha. Yes, yes.
Alright. Yeah. So you thinking that I'm here cause you let me. It's the system, not the person that upset me. Let me interject. When you say that you accept, I don't care if it's a yes or a no, you're gonna get me.
Unapologetic, thought it so I said it, want it so I go and get it. Went and got it, now it's all around us. Talk the truth about it when it was a dream, and when it started happening we seen.
Cause we ready. We gon' take it, we gon' make it, cause we ready. We gon' scream it, we gon' play it from our Chevys. Not a building, not a body, or a levee. Joe, we ready, yeah.
Yo, we ready. We gon' rip it or we'll tip it if it's steady. We gon' lift it even if the shit is heavy. Keep the mission with the vision on the deadly. Yeah, we ready. Yo, we ready.
Hey, yo, we ready. We gonna take it. We gonna make it if we're ready. We gonna, I don't know, but we gonna do it from our Chevys. Hey, D come here and talk about, yo, we gonna rip it. We gonna tip it if it's steady. We gonna lift it even if it's getting heavy. To keep the yo, that joker back.
Please don't ever put him on a track.
Hey, wait a minute, man. Hey, look. I mean, hey, I've been on tracks before. I just come in the beginning, you know. I mean, Tony Blackman put me on her track. I got two brothers in Europe put me on their tracks. I just come in early and spit language. I just, say something deep, and then y'all come in, right? But put me on the next track, AD. Put me on the next track, man.
The real question is this the intro to the Governor Bailey when Dr. Bailey's coming up there? Is this the intro?
All right, this ain't that show. So AD, man, tell us about this collab. I know you've been working with our Chi-Town homie Truth for a while.
Yeah.
Obviously, I love the way he shouted out Dilla in there, right? And certainly those of us hip hop heads loved Jay Dilla and loved the work that he's done. You know, from Slum Village to Common to everybody, right? He's just been in everywhere. So I mean, tell us about your collabs and your history and your relationship with Truth, but then also like this song, like for me, and you know where we're from. So I mean that, he starts out with the church vibe, what I'm saying? It's almost like it's about to go into a James Cleveland song, right? And then boom, you hit this out here. So tell us a little bit about this track, what went into making it.
Yeah. And shout out to Truth, and also shout out to DeAndre and Vintage and Preem. Preem isn't on this album, but we work a lot. Preem is from Decatur.
Yeah.
And also, so there he says Dilla. If you look at the documentary, it's on the University of Michigan site. Truth is maybe one of a few, like the small cohort of people who call me Dilla. And so, he's talking about me.
About you. Oh, I'm sorry.
With Dilla. No, it's all good. Because it's just like a few people. That's definitely not the name for everybody. So, but what happened? Truth came out here. We invited him for I say we, but it was the Carter G. Woodson Center here invited Truth, Guy Ramsey, Michelle Hamilton, Lanice Avery, and Jack Hamilton for a listening roundtable for Sleepwalking Volume 2. And we were going to have a conversation around it. This is like still us trying to figure out ways that we might be able to like move forward with my work. And this was like Dr. McDowell, Deborah McDowell at UVA was asking me, how could my work be supported in a way that doesn't go through this weird dance that I feel like I'm having to do all the time to explain to people why rap music makes sense as like the thing that I'm bringing, that I offer. And so we put together a listening roundtable to listen to the album and then talk with each other and the audience about what's going on. And then after that, we had a dinner. And then after that, we'd had this long day. Truth had come to class earlier, and he was just like old times. He's like, "You trying to make a song?" I'm like, "Yeah, of course." So we go back to the rap lab. And we start like literally what he's saying in the song is what happened. Like he starts chopping up these samples while we're sitting around talking about the day. And then we kind of narrate the not the day, but like this lifetime of interaction that we've had as collaborators. And like this moment then becomes the moment where we're like, yeah, like we're ready. And so there's even like the idea of, if it's a no or a yes, you're gonna get me. It's like we're here now,
right?
And so what do we do? What do we do now that we're here? Which is like one of those questions that was being asked throughout the album. This one just seems to be more. It feels to me more celebratory and like reflective. But this did happen on one of those nights where we were thinking. Like when we were at Eastern Illinois University, when we met, we would have to like steal these moments. Like we were working on like a karaoke machine, and it was definitely the kind of thing that we did instead of going to class. So it was the kind of thing that like there wasn't a rap lab at our university, and now we're in a rap lab writing this song after conversing with this group of folks about this music that we made together. And I don't know. It's a special song to me, but I think that even the time spent at this moment in my life with somebody from home in this place where I live now was really important.
Sure. Dalitso mentioned, we got to go a little bit fast here. Dalitso mentioned that his favorite piece was Ampersand. Anything you want to say about that, AD?
Ampersand. Yeah, I mean, I think that I love. Well, I'll just say this: that the album is not like everything that you hear on the album is not everything that got made. So like the album, it was like this very deliberate, like sort of cutting everything off. As I said before, 34 tracks is not going to, I'm not going to do another 34 track album. So what you get are definitely the things that were my favorites. And I think the most, to the point, the most direct. And so there's a short essay that I wrote about Ampersand. I think that was a track that I was feeling, particularly in the moment when the album got finished, because I wasn't feeling too good about myself, about my life, and about how things were going. And Ampersand, I think, is the most reflective of that. Yeah.
Okay. What about Asterisk?
I think Asterisk is maybe like the flip side, or, it's right. It's, I debated about Asterisk being the first, or about Asterisk being the first track. It was the one that took the longest to write, because I wanted to make sure that what I said was how I honestly felt. I wanted to be sure that when people hear this song, they do hear me being honest. And also like this idea of being in the position that I find myself in, and then complaining in these certain ways about, is it really a win when your team ain't there? Try to get you some sleep and your dreams ain't there. All you want is to make a little something out of nothing you was given. And it ain't enough to just be living. But there's some people who are like literally like who are not living anymore. And also there's some people who are not like winning in these particular ways either. And so it was difficult to like sort of to write that in a space where it felt comfortable enough that, yeah, like I said, that I'm being honest, but I'm also like, there has to be a kind of awareness that that writing this track could also just sound like complaining from this space that like other folk might want to occupy.
Right. No, I appreciate that. So let's just start with you, D, man. Any last words for Professor Carson, for our audience? Not about me and my future aspirations, sir, but about this show.
Man, no. Well, so in just, I think in the most literary sense, a lot of things what you're doing, AD, bro, it just reminded me of, again, August Wilson's plays. August Wilson used to say two things, Black people are the leftovers of history, and that Black people are always performing, right? And so, so when I thought about that and just thinking about your work again in the academy, as young scholars, there's a lot of literature that shows how, Black men and women are deemed either incompetent, we don't know what we're doing, right? And so how we bring ourselves matter in these ways, like you're pointing out, if August Wilson's meta-analysis is that we're people left out of history, but we're history making and we're always performing, to me, it's that sense of history that you bring out through your project, right? Like, and I appreciate that sense of groundedness, especially as a philosopher. For me, tradition matters, right? Which is why I think is an important thing of what you're doing. So I think, I would honestly hope one day a graduate student takes up the methodology of A.D. Carson, right? Because I think you're doing something that's really pertinent in terms of doing history, methodology, some stuff that I work in intellectual history. For me, I'm like, man, I wish I could sit down with you, bro, excavate what you're doing, because it's so groundbreaking. I don't think people are going to catch on. We're praising you now, but I think people need to take you seriously as an intellectual, bringing in a different lens in hip hop. And you're creating a methodology that I think steps outside of the theory stuff that's important. And I know, traditions we come in, but I think there's something unique about your lens that should be studied as an actual methodology that I'm looking forward to. So for me, man, it's a pleasure to be part of this family tree. So I'm just excited to see what more comes out of the work with you, bro.
I appreciate that, D. Thanks, man.
Yeah, no question. I mean, every time I speak on AD, I speak on the fact that he is groundbreaking and that he is setting the standard of what hip hop sort of pedagogy as well as methodology, more so methodology, is going to look like in the next 10 years. And so, especially given the sort of the robust technology that we're under. And so the question for me becomes, to what extent we're, as you say, we're going to not just laud him on websites and magazines, but use him as the framework to what new knowledge and new media and new philosophy sort of looks like. Professor Battle, any last words for our brother, A.D. Carson?
I think D summed it up like pretty well, and the only thing that I would add is that we got to get shirts that says AD is the framework.
Right. AD is the framework. Right. No, I like that. So listen, thank you all for carrying the tradition of academic excellence and Black love. Thank you all for coming on the show. Quite frankly, how I get emotional. I'm almost 50. I'll be 50 in about a year and a few months. So I never take these moments for granted. I thank y'all for respecting and loving me. I thank y'all for giving me someone to brag on at all times. And so my ability to sort of put forth this show, Straight No Chaser, I hope my audience and all those who watch this show afterwards will benefit from it. Those of you who are still watching now, or those of you who will watch, I ask you to share this conversation. Let people know who A.D. Carson is, who Shadawn Battle is, who Dalitso Ruwe is, and let them know who we are here at Straight No Chaser. Like us, share it, tell a friend. As I mentioned earlier, this show has been sponsored by a brother in Cleveland, Ohio, who wanted to remain anonymous, but your check cleared. So we just want to shout out to you and give I'll drink to that to you as well. So listen, if you want to sponsor the show, please give me a ring, give me an email, drop a note in the Facebook page and let me know. You can email me at Julius Bailey, PhD at gmail.com. Tomorrow, as you know, we have to endure a presidential debate that I cannot say that I'm excited to see, but we need to see it. Our democracy needs it. We need to see what might be the difference between 4 more years of Donald Trump and his attacks on your health care, women's right to choose, overall civility in our nation, even while people of conscience are currently in the streets still screaming for justice. He is, as Dalitso mentioned earlier, he is signing orders to eliminate Black studies, to eliminate race studies and discussions of structural inequalities. He and those who support him rather live in an America that makes them feel good to live out its life lie, its sort of its natal deception or disconnection. And so we need to stop that. And so when we talk about oppression and we talk about equity, we need to talk about in what ways not only are we complicit as even people of conscience, but in what ways are we sort of engaged in the thwarting of those who are trying to make it a continued standard for our nation. I ain't falling for it. And I leave you right now with a track by our esteemed guest today. Thank you all for coming out. This is a track by Brother A.D. Carson that, was written, I think, in 2016. Feel free to email him, talk to him about it. But especially after the travesty in Louisville, Kentucky this week, this brings us to the brink of James Baldwin's admonition, the fire next time. Enjoy this video, and thank you for watching at Straight No Chaser.
This is the next time. Prepare for fire. The grotesque fantasy of the shrinking so-called majority, America's nightmare, is slowly transitioning from somnolent slumber to a waking state akin to sleepwalking. America, for as long as it has existed, openly endorsed terror and rode the wave of fear that followed to superpowered dominance domestically and abroad. To be clear, when I say America, I mean white America. The America America sees, wants to see. Not the real America, but the ideal America. The America that stated all men are created equal while enslaving men and women who legally counted 2/5 less than their American masters. America, the beautiful, who crowns her good with brotherhood, but from sea to shining sea, shoots down and locks up young Black boys and girls, men and women, with impunity. This is the next time. Prepare for fire. America's nightmare is America waking up. Good morning, America says. Good morning, America says. Good morning, America says good. Morning America says you're a true patriot. Don't let America die. Don't let America's death be in vain. Fight for America. This is Good Morning. The black and brown bruises on the American body must be cut off, must be amputated, or risk infection spreading. Sleep, America. This is an age-old procedure. Perfect it, or inject local anesthetic, remove bruise, move, repeat procedure, or just sleep. It'll all be over when you wake up. This is the next time. Prepare for fire. This is America burning. This is America learning this is no nightmare. This is America waking up, realizing its bruises have not been removed, may not be removable, and trying to remove these imperfections or risk infection spreading. This black becoming blacker, this brown becoming more, this body belonging to this mind that has perfected seeing itself as pristine. This is America operating, white America cutting into her native skin, excising what does not belong, what she does not want to see. Cut deeper, cut to the white. It burns, but it's worth burning. Not seeing it must be worth the price. This is America screaming, this is America! Waking up. This is the next time. Prepare for fire. The remains will be black. This is America on the brink of break, ever aware of a two-ness of which there is a constitutional greater and lesser, necessary evils that history won't heal and Hennessy won't help. Darkness and lightness created in the likeness of white God and white Jesus, who would rather see white America burn than see it turn into what it already is, what it always was. America becoming awake, America becoming aware, is America becoming so scared of what she knows she is capable of doing to herself. Dream sweet, America. Dream deep. Breathe deeper. Now deeper. And sleep. Sleep. You were made from this. You were made for this. You were made by this. You are on fire. This is the next time. America is burning.